You were there in New York City on that day, weren't you?
That's right, yeah. Interesting enough, I didn't actually live in New York at the time. I did live there over my life a few times, but at the time I lived in Chicago, and I worked for Lehman Brothers in the Chicago office, so I was just in New York for a meeting, so bad luck.
And where were you at the time of the plane?
I was at Three World Financial, where Lehman Brothers was headquartered, so I was at my New York office right across the
Not
street.
very far away.
No, I mean, next door, it's the Green Pyramid building. Looks like the one in Canary Wharf. So it's next door to the North Tower and connected by a pedway right across West Street. So it was literally next door. And you know, you couldn't really get much closer unless you were at Tower 1 or Tower 2.
And when the first plane hit, did you think it was an accident to begin with?
I did not know at all because, I mean, we felt the noise and then we felt the building shake. You know, our building, you know, rumbled a bit and all the people on the perimeter of the building were yelling to get out. So we knew there was something, but it could have been, you know, I thought it might have been like the air conditioning, you know, something going wrong with the AC or it could have been anything. And I was there in '93 as well. Also didn't live in New York, so people don't like to travel with me. But in '93, we really heard it. We felt it because the bomb was in the basement.
Yes.
And so we were on the 9th floor, so you really felt it and you knew what it was. And I was sitting next to one guy from Lebanon and one guy from Northern Ireland, and so from Belfast. So they said it's a bomb, you know. But whereas on 9/11, it wasn't really obvious, and so we just went down. I was with a client. I had just met Pat Scheuer at the reception. Bad luck for her too. She was from Austin, Texas, and hadn't been to New York in 10 years. And she meets. It's bad enough meeting me on a Monday or Tuesday morning, but to meet me and have a plane hit the building 3 minutes later. So we went down the fire escape and watched the North Tower fire from the same, basically across the street from the North Tower. And then we waited. I even thought about going back in the building.
And then a second plane comes.
Then the second plane hit about 15 minutes later, and that's when we left. So the first 15 minutes, we thought, we were trying to figure out, it was speculation. Nobody really knew what had happened. Just saw the fire. I mean, it was a massive fire, obviously. I thought it was a bomb. I thought it was, you know, just a bomb that was set off, you know, on the 70th floor or whatever. But it wasn't until, you know, maybe 45 minutes later that we heard what had actually happened. You know, we were sort of getting out of the area.
And hundreds of thousands of people were evacuated, weren't they, by boat, effectively?
Yeah. A lot of the people at Lehman and Merrill Lynch, which was next door to us, a lot of people went to New Jersey because the boats to Hoboken left from the pier there.
Yeah.
At, you know, Three World Financial, which was Lehman Brothers. So, yeah, a lot of my friends from Lehman got out by boat. I was, you know, because we were at the North Tower, when that second plane hit, the debris was coming down. So everybody ran about a block or two north. And so I just kept going because I knew I had friends. And, you know, again, not being a New Yorker at the time, I didn't feel like I should, you know, hang around. And I had this poor woman from Texas. And so I just thought it was important to get her out of the area.
What was the reaction kind of from your loved ones in that immediate aftermath? Because they'll have known that you were there.
Yeah, it was tough. My wife was home in Chicago with a baby, you know, a newborn and a 4-year-old, and she's watching the television, you know, and of course, not only was my phone, wallet, everything else, luggage, coat, at my office and ultimately went up in a cloud of asbestos. But the cell phones weren't working anymore.
They all went
out. You know, Pat had a cell phone, but it just wouldn't work. So my poor wife, Mary Ellen, was calling my office in Chicago, and then Rich Barnett, who's still one of my best mates, called New York. Anybody heard from Greg? Because the New York guys stayed on the trading desk. And they said, anybody heard from Greg? You know, Mary Ellen's worried, and she's watching the building burn, and my building is next door to it with the pyramid. And of course, Max said to young Rich, tell Mary Ellen that I just talked to him and he's great. Total lie, but you know, that's what you do in a pinch.
No,
and so
it was
she was real worried.
Some of the scenes that day were pretty horrendous, and we won't go through them on a Sunday morning.
No.
And the Pentagon too, and that gets forgotten.
Yeah,
she doesn't.
And Pennsylvania.
The Pentagon, and then of course the plane where the passengers took over, Flight 93.
Todd Beamer. Let's roll.
It was an horrendous day.
Yeah.
It was a shocking day. Just a thought on the ceremony yesterday. We had a lot of former American presidents were there, and you are the chairman of the Republican Overseas UK. Why was Donald Trump not there?
Great question, Nigel. the media and the government have always traditionally been liberal. Now, I know they had George W. Bush there, but how could you not? You know, he was such a part of the story, and those moments, those great moments when he was at Ground Zero with his arm around the fire chief. And
he showed leadership,
you know,
didn't
he really did. So I think it would have been a little much not to invite W. But, you know, as you know from your time in America, you know, the government, the entrenched career people in government, typically lean left, and obviously the media leans left. So I wasn't surprised that President Trump wasn't invited. I was disappointed, but I wasn't surprised.
Well, I must say I was somewhat surprised. And Rudy Giuliani, who of course was the mayor at the time of New York, and who achieved unbelievable success against crime in New York and turned it from one of the most dangerous cities in North America to one of the... And as a regular visitor to New York through that period of time, the change was extraordinary, astonishing. The level of confidence that one had going out of New York. He didn't seem to be very evident either, did he?
No, and it's really a shame because he did
a great job.
He was fantastic. I mean, he was, Time Magazine Man of the Year. They called him, America's mayor. It was a great time, and I missed that. You know, the unity was amazing. W was polling at 90 after 9/11, and the country. I hate to sound corny, but the country came together, and it was amazing. Even in New York, which isn't the warmest place in the world. People don't reach out. People are very guarded in New York, as you know. And everyone, total strangers, were helping us. And it was pretty obvious what had happened to me and Pat.
Yeah.
And people reaching out. When I called my wife for the first time, it was probably an hour and a half after the planes hit. I was in a total stranger's landline phone in an office because I couldn't get to anybody at that time that I knew. I mean, it's fantastic. Come on in, gave us drinks, gave us phones.
Yeah.
It was a tough time, but it was a great moment, and there were so many acts of bravery that were just phenomenal.
Well, on that note, Paul, can I just quickly bring you in, because obviously some of the, I think, most brave people on that day were the firefighters who went in to try and rescue those either trapped in the tower or those who sadly were buried in the rubble.
Yeah,
what did you make of those things?
I was serving in the fire service in Britain at the time. I'd been a firefighter for 4 years at the time, and of course 344 firefighters lost their lives in New York, and it was just so powerful. They were doing what firefighters always do in the most professional way. People were running out of the building and they were running into the building. Incredible professionalism and bravery. But I was speaking to someone yesterday and I said the fire service internationally is like a big family, really. And when something as devastating as that happens, you forget the politics of everything and you just think, actually, 344 of our brothers and sisters have perished in the line of duty. So that had a really, and I remember it very vividly, had a really profound impact in the fire and rescue service in Britain. And there were some really great links were forged between firefighters in London, I know, and firefighters in New York in the aftermath of that. And it really did bring people in the fire service together. So out of tragedy like that, some good can...
And there is a magnificent memorial, Paul, to them. And once the restrictions end, the Brits go to New York in very, very large numbers for a week or a long weekend or whatever, and we will be going back to New York. And I'd say to everybody that if you go down to Ground Zero, the museum that they put together there is absolutely stunning. The tribute to the 344, not just to them, but to everybody. And I found it a very moving place to visit. I went there 4 years ago, and I knew quite a few people who died that day because I'd worked in the financial business industry. And as you walk out, there's a photograph of everybody. And I remember thinking, gosh, my link to this is nothing like those of the families or close friends, but colleagues, people I'd been for a drink with. And I found it very, very moving. But I think in terms of the way that the firefighters are remembered at that museum, it's a place that I would recommend everyone goes and visits. And it's been done beautifully.
Yeah, it has.